Hello everybody and welcome to the video for Chapter 6, Understanding the Management Process. We'll get started here right away. Okay, so what we are doing in this chapter is talking about the beginning. It's the first of our disciplinary, subdisciplinary studies in business. And this is what we call the management process, understanding the management process. So we have 4 concentrations in the School of Business, and I'm going to show you this here. We go here to the School of Business website, and what I want to show you is the different concentrations that are available. And you don't have to concentrate in anything if you are a business student, but you can. And so if you go here to the Bachelor of Business and you go to concentrations, here we go. And you'll notice here, let me just go to this page. So we have several different concentration options, and let's see. I'm trying to see where they show this here. Okay, well, it was over here on the menu. If you look over here, you can see we have accounting, finance, management, and marketing, and then you can individualize if one of those doesn't work. But those are the 4 that we offer. And so if you think about this class as the Intro to Business, we are talking about all the different disciplines in the School of Business, and but we're going to then focus also on management, and then later we'll talk about accounting, marketing, and finance. So for management, we'll start off as we usually do with a basic definition of what that term means. Then we'll kind of dig into management a little bit on a higher level, the functions of management, the different kinds of managers that you'll encounter in the business world. And, this will vary dramatically by the size of business that you're involved in. Larger businesses, of course, have much larger structures and many more layers of management, whereas smaller businesses have fewer. But the functions are the same. The functions still have to be dealt with. You still need to plan, organize, lead, motivate, and control the business, whether it's a one-person business or 30,000 person business. So the functions are still the same. It's just who does them and how they're distributed that differs. And of course the scale. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into this. And then we'll look at the different skills that are necessary for various types of managers, what we mean by leadership and types of leadership. We spend a lot of time on that topic in the School of Business. And then the different steps in the process, management process. Okay, so moving to our case, which we don't, since we're in the video format here, we won't be able to discuss it. But what I would like you to do is read the Inside Business description of Twitter, and remember that this is before Elon Musk bought it. So the company is now called X, and but it's the same company. It used to be a public company. Elon Musk purchased all the shares for $44 billion and is now the sole owner of it. So what I'd like you to look at here is Jack Dorsey's management style. Now, Jack Dorsey was one of the founders of Twitter, also one of the founders of Square. So he's a billionaire many times over. But he has a kind of a management style that the case describes and that you should read about. And then look at what this company, Elliott Management, is doing. Elliott Management is what we call an activist investor. And an activist investor is somebody who buys a large enough share of a company that they have some say in its management. Remember when we talked about corporations, shareholders hire directors, directors hire officers. So shareholders don't really have a say in the day-to-day operations of the business. That's what the directors do. But in the case of an activist investor, what these investors do is they agitate for changes in the company in the way that it's managed, or sometimes agitate for them to sell certain assets or buy assets or go into different businesses to increase shareholder value for their own benefit. So many many public companies have this. I've worked at several companies over the years where an activist investor came in, and it's it changes the way that the company reacts to its shareholders. It changes the types of decisions that it makes. It affects the management of the business, even though as I said, legally, shareholders aren't involved directly in the management of the business. So it's just kind of an interesting case on how that works. Okay, so now let's start with a definition. What do we mean by management? The term is very broad. This is a very broad description here from the book, which says it's the process of coordinating people and other resources to achieve the goals of an organization. And that sounds very generic, and it is. I mean, this is essentially what the law says managers are. In that structure: shareholders, directors, managers. Shareholders are the owners. The directors are kind of the legal trustees of the shareholders, but it's the management that is in charge of coordinating and executing on the business plan. So this is typically headed up by a CEO or a president, and then that CEO or that president reports to the board, and then the rest of the management reports to the CEO or the president. And that's typically how it's structured, although there are variations on that. What the book is trying to describe here is the different resources that management has control over. So if you think a CEO is at the top of the management pyramid, and what does that CEO do? Well, what they do is manage all of the resources of the company. Ultimately, like I said, the board is responsible for this, so the CEO has to report to the board on these activities. But effectively, the CEO takes material resources, which is, physical things, plants, inventory, whatever else. But also remember that, and I have a note here, intangible resources too. So things like patents and trademarks and copyright. So whatever those resources are, whatever those assets are that the company holds. And then the CEO is typically the at the top of the pyramid and is in charge of all the people, is ultimately responsible for all the people. So human resources, we think of them as a resource. They are, right? People's efforts are a resource. But unlike material resources, a company doesn't own those resources. What a company does is pays people for their time. And whether you're a salaried person or a hourly person, what you're doing is selling your time, which is your effort, your knowledge, whatever it is you bring to the table, to the company. And then the company's management, their job is to take those resources along with these other resources and then produce the outcome, whatever the output is that the company produces, whether that's goods or services. And of course, in order to do that, you need money, you need financial resources. So this is going to be either capital that comes either from selling shares, from equity, or from debt, or the net proceeds of net profits that the company produces. All of those financial resources that are produced by the company are managed by the management and are used to pay the expenses, to make investments, to do the different things that it needs to do to produce the outcome. And then the last resource is information. And the book talks a lot about information coming from external information, like competitive information, customer information, so on. But there's also internal information. So managers rely on the sales reports, the financial reports, the management reports to decide whether and to what degree they need to make decisions about the management of the firm. So, but the point of this is that it's the management, it's really the board that owns this responsibility, but it delegates that responsibility to the management. And the management's job is to take all of these resources and manage them for the benefit of the shareholders. Okay, so what are the basic functions that that managers do to do this? So in order to take all these resources and produce the output, what are the functions of management? And you'll see here that the way this is often described, and you'll see this in different, described slightly different ways in different models, and I put some different graphics on this slide from different places, but effectively, what management is supposed to do is make a plan, and this is something that you're all doing with your business plans. This first box, planning, you are engaging in the activity of planning the business. Then you take that plan and you organize the business around that plan. So if the plan says, we're going to produce this product, okay, so what exactly does that mean? If that's the ultimate goal, is to produce, let's say, an iPhone. So what are all the things that you have to do? You're going to need engineers. You're going to need software, hardware and software engineers. You're going to need to figure out how to manufacture it. So you're going to need somebody needs to figure that part of it out. You're going to need marketing to make sure that the customers know about the product. Just on and on. All the different things you can think of that you might need in a business. It's the job of management to organize the company around whatever it is it's trying to achieve. Okay, so then once you have this plan and an organization, then management's job is to motivate motivate people to do the work that needs to be done to achieve the plan. So managers and management is generally it's about making the plan, but then it's about executing the plan. And so you do that by leading and motivating people, and then by controlling what's happening. So, and you'll see here, this is often based around some form of mission statement or vision statement or goal setting that allows you to identify what that plan is so that you can organize the business around that and achieve that plan. You'll see it up in the upper right, the SWOT analysis. This is something you'll see a lot in the School of Business. It's used in management frequently. I've been involved in many, many SWOT analyses over the many years that I've been doing this in businesses. But the idea behind a SWOT analysis is that you identify, as part of this planning process, what strengths you have, and then what opportunities you have. So if you look at the SWOT analysis as kind of a grid, the left column, strengths and opportunities, if you line up your strengths with your opportunities, then that will tell you what is the best course of action for the business. You want to take the things that you're good at and line them up with the opportunities that you have. On the other hand, if there are things that are weaknesses, you want and other aspects that are threats, you want to avoid those or navigate around them to the extent possible. So, if one of your strengths is that you have really good engineering, but one of your weaknesses is you don't have enough money, then, you'll have to fit, that will tell you whether the opportunity that you're trying to achieve is achievable. If it requires massive capital resources, then that's a weakness and a threat to your business. So you might have to realign and plan differently. And so that's kind of how a SWOT analysis is used. And then you'll see at the bottom right, these different kinds of plans that a company might make. A strategic plan, which is kind of the long-term vision, where we want to be in 5 or 10 years. A tactical plan, which is how do you do what are all the steps to get from where you are to where you're going. Operational plan typically involves how are we going to actually operationalize our plan? How are we going to deliver the service or the product? And then contingency plans, there's actually a whole industry around this. I have a neighbor who used to be involved in this, and this is what he did for a living, was help companies develop contingency plans in case something bad happened. So he used to work for Alaska Airlines. So one of the things that he did for them was help them figure out, what do we do if we have a crash? It sounds awful, but if you're operating an airline, one of the things you have to think about is, what do we do if the worst case scenario occurs, and you make a plan for that. So you have a script ready to go and you're not scrambling. That's one of the things that management is responsible for doing. Okay, so what kind of managers are there? So as I mentioned at the intro, this varies dramatically by the size of the organization. So in a single person organization like my own law practice, I'm all of these. I'm the top management. I don't have middle management, and I don't have line managers, because I'm everything. I'm the president, the CEO, and the treasurer, the secretary, and the lawyer who's practicing law. So in my organization, I wear all of these hats. As an organization grows, you also grow in levels of management. So in this example, you'll see you have this top level manager. These are typically, I think I mentioned this in classes, what we would refer to as the C-suite, the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, so on. That's the highest level. Typically, the direct reports to the CEO is what you would call the top management. And then the middle management is in between that top level, in a company big enough for this, in between the top level, the top level decision makers, and then the line managers who are actually doing the work. The middle managers are in between that. So you can see this here like a division or a plant manager. So when I was in the mortgage business, we would have regional managers. So regional managers didn't make any loans, but they oversaw a group of offices of loan origination. So they were responsible for an area or a district or a region or whatever. And the first line managers are those that actually do the day-to-day work. That, you know, a branch manager in my loan example would be a first line manager. It's somebody who's, you know, managing the actual originators in the office, and who then reports to the regional manager, who then reports to senior or top management. That's typically how it works. And then at the bottom here are all the different areas of management. You'll have this structure inside of finance, operations, marketing, HR, administration. In some companies, research and development and engineering and other things like that. Depends on what the business needs and how it's organized. We'll talk in a few slides here about exactly how you organize this. But I guess the takeaway from this slide is you have these levels of management. And the larger the company gets, the larger the pyramid gets, the more levels there are of management. Okay, so what do you need to be a good manager? And if you look at this list, this looks like a list of skills that pretty much anybody needs to be successful in any job. And I think that's generally true. I mean, if you look at this set of skills, these are the same set of skills that you would say is necessary to be a good lawyer, or to be a good engineer, or to be a good marketing person. Whatever it is, you need good analytical skills. You need to be able to analyze and solve problems. Interpersonal skills, you know, there are some exceptions to this. I guess there are some jobs where you can sit in front of a computer all day and never interact with another human being. And in that case, an interpersonal skill set would not be as important, but that's very rarely the case for a manager. So if you're managing people, you have to be able to interact with people on some level. And one of the problems that happens in a lot of organizations I've seen happen is sometimes management will promote the most competent person from whatever field they're in, but not necessarily the best manager. So like, for example, the top salesperson is not always the best sales manager. If you might be really good at sales, and that requires one skill set, one interpersonal skill set. You know, being good at sales is very hard to do, very hard to do well. I'm horrible at it. But if you're managing salespeople, that's an entirely different skill set than being a salesperson. And so sometimes the best salesperson gets promoted to be the sales manager, and it's not always a good fit. So it's important to understand not only that there are interpersonal skills necessary, but that it's the right kind for that job. You obviously have to be good technically at whatever it is you're doing. You have to understand the business. You have to be able to do the work and understand the work that your subordinates are doing. Communication skills is kind of overlaps a little bit with interpersonal skills. You have to be able to communicate. And then you have to be able to, you know, conceptually, you have to understand and think sometimes in abstract terms. Excuse me. Okay. So let's look at different styles of leadership. So you might say, all right, you're a good salesperson, so we're going to promote you to be a sales manager. And, you know, you might be a good sales manager, but not all good sales managers are the same. They have different personalities to them. And I'm not going to read this slide to you. You can look at this content in the book. I have a little diagram here that talks a little bit about the different styles as well. But basically, some leaders are just very they're very in the weeds. They're like what they call like micromanagers. They hover over and want to be involved in every decision underneath them. And some of them are just very hands off, and allow and empower their subordinates to do their work and don't really interfere with it that much. So you can have anything in between. I remember in the law there used to be this term for partners and law firms, and there was this term for being called a screamer. So when I worked for one of these people before, she was a screamer. So when she got mad at something, she just started yelling, and everybody, after a while you kind of start getting desensitized to it. At first it's like terrifying, but then eventually you just, oh, okay, well, they're yelling at me again, or they're just yelling because they're frustrated or whatever it is. um, but the point of this slide is that there are some differences. There are some stylistic differences among managers, and there's no necessarily right or wrong answer for this. You can be successful by being in any one of these categories. But what is important to understand is what's the right fit for the organization and the people that you're managing. Sometimes an autocratic, a very task-oriented leadership style is welcome and important in a certain management job, and in other cases it can get in the way. I've seen both examples. So the point is, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's a stylistic thing, and that the organization has to decide what style it wants, and what style is appropriate for each level of management, or even each department of management. And that's up to the managers above the next level up to identify what's the right management fit for this particular position. Okay, so how do you make decisions? This is kind of generic decision-making content. You'll see this in the book. There's a ton of models. If you go on the internet and you search managerial decision-making processes, you'll find all of these different diagrams. I have one of those here. But basically, the basic idea is that what a manager does is identifies either a problem or an opportunity. So it's something that needs to be solved, either solve a problem, fix something that's broken, or pursue some sort of opportunity that exists. Figure out what choices you have, generate a list of alternatives, and then come up with some system for selecting the alternative, making a choice. But then, and the last box that often kind of gets ignored, is implementing that choice, but then evaluating it, going back and looking at it and seeing, was that the right choice? One of the problems that I have seen in the corporate world over the years is a lot of time spent on the identifying problems and opportunities, generating alternatives, and then having big meetings to select it. And then if it fails, we're like, oh, we'll forget that. No one wants to talk about bad choices. They want to move on to the next choice. And that's a mistake in a lot of ways, because if you do that, you're failing to learn from the decision. And the reality is that you are going to make a bunch of decisions in your business career, and many of them will be failures. Many of them will turn out to be bad decisions. And that's, you obviously try to avoid that to the extent possible, but that's just the nature of engaging in business activity. And if you're not evaluating those decisions, evaluating those failures, looking for ways to improve the next time, then you're not getting the benefit of the failure. And sometimes some of the best ideas come from failure. There's the famous story of the Post-it notes. I have them right here on my desk. I have a thing of Post-it notes. If you're not familiar with the story, the glue that they used for Post-it notes was a failure. 3M was trying to develop an adhesive, and for whatever reason, it didn't work the way they expected. It wasn't as strong as they were hoping. But then somebody looked at this and said, hey, wait a second, this failed adhesive, this could be used for something else. And an entire product line was born from a failure. And that's there's millions of stories like that. And so it's really important in the business process, in the business decision making process, to evaluate opportunities and then make adjustments accordingly. Okay, so lastly is Tesla. And I won't, obviously there's the case, so I hope that you will read the case and evaluate, what kind of strengths did Tesla have? How did it go from being a startup with nothing, an idea that Elon Musk had, to dominant in electric vehicles? I was just reading an article this morning about how Rivian sells was happy to sell 15 or 20,000 units, and Tesla sells 500,000 units. And so, how did they become so dominant? And one of the things they talk about in the case is that the strategy, the plan from the beginning was to create a sports car. And if you don't remember, many of you may not remember, but Tesla started out, their first product was a little kind of spider sports car. And the idea was to make this kind of cool, fast electric sports car, sell it, at a premium price to, rich people who could afford it, then use that money to reinvest in the business, and then ultimately build an electric car that more people could afford. I mean, that was the plan all along. Now, it took a long time to get from there, from point A to point B. It took a lot of money, a lot of investment, and ultimately it worked. So the question that for you in reading this case is, looking back at this as an example, what sort of evidence can you see of management decision making that you think led to this result? And of course, looking back on this with 2020 hindsight, you always have to be careful. What worked for Tesla might not work for the next company, but you still can learn from it by evaluating business management decisions, and then going back and trying to decipher what decisions were, what can you learn from it, and how can you apply that to future decisions or decisions in other companies. Okay, so that's it for chapter 6. I tried to keep this brief so that you didn't have to sit here and listen to me talk tried to keep it under half an hour, and it looks like I was able to do that. So hopefully it was helpful. If you have any questions, by all means, email me or post any questions you have on the forum, and I will see you in class the next time we meet. Thank you.